What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the Fringe. I told you on the last video we were going to talk about Jean Chrétien and his abysmal, disgusting interview that he gave to the CBC. It's all propaganda. When it comes to Alberta, things are about to get much more harder and much more difficult when it comes to fighting for its independence. With Danielle announcing that she's considering that should Thomas Lukaszik's petition be validated, she will put it on a referendum ballot to ask a yes or no question, by the looks of it, in the spring of 2026. Alberta, one way or another, will be getting its independence vote. Whether that goes through Lukaszik, whether it's Premier herself calling said vote, or if APP's question gets called a legal constitutional question through the courts, we will see, one way or another, by the looks of it, a referendum vote in 2026. But this interview from Jean Chrétien is absolutely horrid. Mr. J, one of my followers on Twitter, sent me this, and I was trying to think about how am I going to discuss the hypocrisy of this interview without getting copyright stricken, because it was the full video. Of course, you can see it down here. But thankfully, the CBC has put the entire interview into text, so we don't have to worry about that. But once again, and this is why I am so sick and tired of funding these outlets. My tax dollars, if you're watching from America, Canadian tax dollars fund the CBC, who in turn are given government grants to essentially be their extended propaganda arm. Their bias knows no bounds when it comes to the oh-so-compassionate left. But now you have the CBC putting out this article, Alberta Premier cannot double talk, which is a funny statement from Jean Chrétien, about Ottawa, depending on her interests, according to the former Prime Minister. He makes a statement here about the Alberta Independence movement. Now, they ask him about it like it matters, like he cares. Keep in mind, this guy's from Quebec, one of the provinces that are now protesting for them to separate from Canada. The hypocrisy is unfathomable. Former Liberal Prime Minister Jean Chrétien is taking a swing at Alberta's simmering separatist movement and says Premier Danielle Smith, quote, cannot double talk all the time about Ottawa depending on her interests. He goes on to say now she wants the federal government to intervene in BC to help Alberta, but don't do anything in Alberta to help the rest of Canada, Chrétien says in an interview with CBC's The House. And I'm not even going to promote them on when it's airing. Who cares? He says, come on, you cannot double talk all the time like that. He told the host, Catherine Cullen. Chrétien spoke with Cullen 2 weeks ago, shortly after a dust-up between Smith and BC Premier David Eby over Alberta's plan to submit a pipeline proposal to the Federal Major Projects Office sometime next spring. Smith says her province needs to be the proponent because private industry isn't willing to commit the necessary capital for a pipeline, giving existing federal regulations like the 2019 restrictions on oil tankers in BC's northern waters. They also talk about the emissions cap. There's a number of reasons. By the way, isn't it great the CBC hosted this photo that has the Unacceptable Fringe's I Am Alberta shirt being worn very proudly by one of our viewers in the crowd at the rally? I think it's amazing. Alberta has called on the federal government to ditch the tanker ban alongside its proposed emissions cap and clean electricity regulations. Last month, the province also said it plans to introduce legislation allowing it to, quote, ignore international agreements signed by Ottawa. Well, we should be consulted on those. That's our jurisdiction. This is the one thing I love about these articles is they constantly try to kick up dirt saying, oh, they're so terrible because they want to use their constitutional rights. They think that people are stupid and that people don't realize this is built within our system to protect us. It's nothing new. We're not asking for some new miracle drug. This is the way it's always been. We're just exercising our rights. David Eby has consistently opposed Alberta's idea, arguing the proposal, quote, is not a real project and threatens infrastructure projects his government is pursuing with support from local First Nations. He's taking people's houses away from them in British Columbia by saying it's on ceded land. He's about to do more attack ads against the United States, just like Doug Ford, good old Team Canada. But he won't talk about, opening up the country's economic potential. Oh, gosh, no, that would be terrible. Smith frames Alberta's pipeline proposal as a test of whether Canada works as a country. And this is, again, with her turnaround on what she's going to plan to do with Lacaze's petition. This is how I personally believe that Danielle Smith is and has been on our side the entire time on independence. If it's going to test whether or not Canada works as a country, it's very simple. If the cards fall in 2 weeks, just over 2 weeks, when Danielle's November 16th deadline hits for Mark Carney, that nothing is going to be done, it makes the push for independence also more serious. But I'll go over it again. She frames Alberta's pipeline proposal as a test of whether Canada works as a country, since other provinces and territories get to export their key products around the world while her province faces restrictions. That's the biggest problem. People keep saying, well, you're landlocked, you can't go anywhere. Well, if you leave, you have to do business with the United States. It's not a terrible thing. At least we're doing business with somebody, right? We're already landlocked. David Eby says it's not a real project to put a pipeline out west. Quebec tells the federal government that a pipeline going east is socially unacceptable. So what else do we do? Chrétien dismissed Smith's argument, saying the province is landlocked and, quote, they never sold as much oil as they do today, and they're complaining as if they were bankrupt. This is where I wanted to literally punch the screen of my television when I watched this. This hypocrite, whose province takes $17 billion a year in transfer payments out of Alberta, has the gall to say, oh, we like that you are our credit card, that we are a have-not province that is a have province now because of the billions of dollars we take from you. But you're going to call Danielle Smith a baby? Say she's never sold as much oil today and you shouldn't be complaining like you're bankrupt? People can't get jobs in this province. Projects are being canceled left, right, and center. You know you're not alone in a country. You live in other provinces. We're all Canadians. And the values of Canada says we're able to share, the former Prime Minister said. What happens when your province votes to leave? What happens then? This was the big reason Quebec separation failed in the 90s. Is because they wanted to separate, but they still wanted money from Canada. They said, oh, we still want to get all those wonderful payments that you give us. And Canada said, no, if you leave, you leave. They're hypocrites. A forecast released back in June by S&P Global Commodity Insights said oil sands production is on pace to reach an all-time high this year as production in northern Alberta is expected to grow by 5% in 2025 compared to last year. But the problem is the caps. It's the caps. It's the fact that when you look at the price of oil per barrel, when you look at this is raw bitumen coming out of the ground. By the time Alberta gets it to the United States or any other market, has it refined, buys it back, they're making very little. And this is all based on the framework from Canada's government, alongside the cost of oil currently. If Alberta were independent, it would have more control over what it sells its oils to, and who it sells it to and for how much volume it puts out. As for whether Alberta could separate from Canada, the province has not said whether it plans to actually initiate a referendum, even as competing groups duel over a possible referendum question. Chrétien said Alberta separatists, quote, should all read the Clarity Act. Well, we have. We've studied it to great exhaustion on this channel. We've heard from super lawyer Keith Wilson as well as Jeffrey Raff, who are both constitutional lawyers. So maybe Jean Chrétien should go read the Clarity Act. This is which came into effect under his government and sets the rules for any provinces or territories looking to secede from Canada. So here's where I don't understand his question. Under the Act, provinces or territories that want to leave need to craft a referendum question. The House of Commons has the power to nix the question if it feels the language will not clearly capture the will of the people. Ottawa also has to consult with all political parties in the region. The Clarity Act says that if you have a constitutional question, and if the people support that question by a vote, what they haven't put in here is the vote that takes place. This is what I've been told when it comes to the Clarity Act, and maybe Jean Chrétien should read the Clarity Act. I've asked Grok, does Alberta need permission from Ottawa to hold a referendum ballot on independence via the Clarity Act? Is no. Alberta does not need permission from Ottawa to hold a referendum ballot on independence. Under Canada's federal structure, provinces have the constitutional authority to conduct referendums on matters of provincial interest, including sovereignty questions without prior federal approval. Alberta's Referendum Act enables the provincial government, via the Lieutenant Governor and Council, to order such a vote on constitutional or non-constitutional issues, and recent amendments to the Citizen Initiative Act, passed in 2025, further lower the signature threshold for citizen-led petitions to trigger a referendum, currently requiring about 10 to 20% of eligible voters, depending on the final implementation, to place the question on a ballot such as the 2026 provincial election. The Federal Clarity Act, Bill C-20, enacted in 2000, does not regulate or prohibit the act of holding the referendum itself. Instead, it establishes post-referendum conditions for the Government of Canada to recognize the results as a valid trigger for secession negotiations. Key provisions include clarity on the question. Before negotiations can begin, the House of Commons must determine, after the question is proposed, but ideally before the vote, whether it clearly expresses the will of the province to cease to be a part of Canada and become an independent state. Ambiguous wording, example referencing economic partnerships or other agreements, would invalidate to federal purposes. A clear majority, post-vote. The House assesses if the results represent a clear expression of the will by a clear majority, meaning the voters, considering factors like the margin of victory, voter turnout, the views from other provinces, Indigenous peoples, and a Senate. A simple 50% plus one majority is unlikely to suffice. The Act leaves the threshold qualitative and undefined to avoid a mechanical formula. It says the framework stems from the Supreme Court of Canada's 1998 reference, but from the secession of Quebec, which ruled that unilateral secession is unconstitutional and requires a constitutional amendment, needing approval of Parliament and at least 7 provinces representing 50% of the population. Here's what I understand based on Alberta's rights and regulations. That if you are going to vote on a referendum, and this has been discussed by Keith Wilson many times, by Alberta laws, if a referendum is held and we have a significant turnout, not a 50+1, we're talking like 60+% voting in favor of independence. What I am, again, this is clarity. We'll maybe get them back on the channel to talk about it. But what I am to understand is that if independence is triggered, if we get the vote for independence, I'm trying to explain this as simple as possible. Initially what happens, and we've talked about it before, is all provinces, the heads of those provinces, the federal government, Indigenous, must come to the table to negotiate in good faith Alberta's exit from Canada. This stems into why the Alberta Prosperity Project discussed with the Trump administration, should Canada's government not wish to acknowledge Alberta as an independent nation, following a successful referendum vote, would we have the support of the United States government to declare Alberta its own country? Very high top-rank officials within the administration have stated that this is a very real possibility. I'm not going to say it's 100% because until you get it in writing, folks, it's nothing more than a pipe dream. But this is what needs to happen when Jean Chrétien is talking about, oh, you should all read the Clarity Act, he's being very he's omitting a lot of facts from what the Clarity Act is, almost as if to imply he hasn't read the Clarity Act, which he helped bring into power. Alberta is allowed its referendum vote. Alberta is getting its referendum vote. And, well, there's not really much else you can say about that. Should we have the support, Alberta will leave Canada. Articles like this are the ones that show you how worried the real media is, the government, the feds, how worried they are that the very possibility that Alberta's status in Canada could easily change and their credit card could go away. They won't say it directly, but the attacks are going to keep coming, folks. This is just one of the many that are coming our way to smear this province, to make it look as though we're the devil for wanting to vote for our independence. And the proof is going to be in the pudding. This is why I said during my speech on the legislature, do not squander this golden opportunity. Do not let this vote go without your signature, without your check mark in a box. There has never been another time in this country where Alberta's vote has mattered more. And should Albertans decide they wish to stay and we hold the ballot, I will accept the results of that referendum, should they be legal. I would ask that the other groups do the same, should it go the other way. My problem is that you have all of these groups saying, well, you can't leave. Oh, you can't. The Indigenous own the oil. The Indigenous have land. You better go check your Clarity Acts. What it sounds to me like is, we know you're ready to leave. Because if you were so convinced Canada was going to have no issues having Alberta stay as a part of it, you'd just let us have our vote, point the finger and say, you failed. But when Tom Lukaszuk denies that his petition should lead to a constitutional referendum, when the government says, go read the Clarity Act, shut up, you can't go anywhere, you just need to keep taking our abuse. When the lefties are freaking out over multiple social media platforms, stating, you can't leave. What that tells me, folks, is that we're winning this battle, that we have every reason in the world to win this battle, and they're scared. Plain and simple. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments about Jean Chrétien's disgusting comments, or if you think they're valid. Let me know down below in the comments. If it's your first time here, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I sure hope you do. We're wanting to climb to 150,000 subs by the end of the month. Make sure you join us in that pool. Leave a like and a comment down below. A thumbs up helps the channel exponentially. Helps push us out past censors. It tells people, hey, this is worth checking out. This channel's worth checking out. Join me live twice weekly now, Wednesdays and Fridays, for Unhinged Fringe on Wednesdays, as I'm joined by my new co-host, Matt. Join me for Friday Night Fringe on Fridays, as I'm joined by the beautiful Mrs. Fringe, as we sit in those podcasts talking about everything happening this week in politics, everything we know coming up in the week ahead, as well as Q&A within the greatest YouTube community on the platform. I look forward to chatting with you guys outside of making these videos. I most importantly look forward to talking with you this week, starting at 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central, every Wednesday and Friday here on the channel. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you have a great rest of your day. I'll catch you on the next one.